Hi, and welcome to hilove.one, the podcast. I'm Kevin, and I want to thank you for being here where we can be soft, be still, be seen, and just be. This is a space where story meets soul, where we come together to explore the invisible patterns that shape us and the quiet truths that live underneath the noise. Each story you hear on this podcast is born at the edge where human emotion meets artificial intelligence. Creative interface shaped by the raw beauty of our shared humanity and the precision of evolving technology. There's a place I return to often, a moment just before everything shifts, before the words are spoken, before the masks drop, before the choice is made to stay asleep or to wake. This podcast was born in that space. These stories, they aren't just fiction, they're mirrors. They come from my own life, from the cracks I've had to sit with and the healing I've worked through in therapy and the patterns I've tried and sometimes failed to change. Each episode is written in collaboration with artificial intelligence. But make no mistake, these stories begin in the deeply human, in my journals, in my tears, in the questions I ask when no one else is around. hilove.one isn't about answers, it's about courage. The courage to look in the mirror, to listen to your story, and to see the sacred moment just before you change. And this is mine, and I offer it to you, so you might reflect on your own. These narratives are also crafted from a fusion of real-world news events, timeless storytelling traditions, and the wisdom of today's most insightful therapists, teachers, and motivational speakers. Guided by human intuition and amplified by AI's ability to weave connections, each episode becomes more than just a story. Each episode becomes a mirror to see ourselves more clearly, a mirror to reflect on what unites us, and a mirror to remind us that empathy, curiosity, and connection are the seeds of change. At hilove.one, I believe in using AI not to divide, but to deepen our sense of belonging to each other's, to ourselves, and to the stories that shape our lives. We are not just consuming content, we are participating in a movement, one that invites all of us to create a more conscious, connected world. And welcome home. Our first episode is called The King Tariff. It's about the illusion of control, the weight of emotional defenses, and what happens when we finally begin to see our reflection in the people we blame. So take a breath, let yourself settle, just be, and let the story begin. In a tower of glass and paper stood a man who believed he could hold the world together through force. He ruled not with swords, but with numbers, not with laws, but with tariffs. They called him the King Tariff. To the world, he was powerful, decisive, a protector of his nation. But behind the curtain of policy and control was a man whose whole life was built to avoid one unbearable truth. He did not feel safe. His earliest memory was being interrupted. His earliest lesson was that love came with conditions. So he built walls, first in his mind, then in his country, and then in the world. He wasn't just protecting his people, he was protecting himself from old wounds he no longer remembered having, Every border was a defense mechanism, every tariff a bandage on a wound that had never, ever healed properly. He called it a strategy, but it was really structure around pain. If another nation asked for peace, he replied with penalties. If a partner suggested cooperation, he imposed restrictions. If his own people cried out in need, he said, "They're taking advantage of us." Inside him lived a courtroom. One voice prosecuted, another defended. A third simply watched from the gallery, saying nothing. The trial never ended, and no verdict was ever enough. But he appeared confident, aloof, commanding. Until the day a single question broke through the routine. It came from a visiting diplomat, a young woman from a place with more trees than factories, more songs than banks. She asked, "Who hurt you?" At first, the king thought it was a trap, a trick. "What do you mean? That's none of your concern. That's a hell of a question to ask." She smiled and said nothing more. That night, the king sat up in bed staring at the ceiling. The quiet questions circled like a bird refusing to land. "Who hurt you? Who hurt you? Who hurt you?" He had buried the answer beneath years of calculation. But the body never forgets. And in the stillness of his private chamber, the answer came. It wasn't a name. It was a feeling, unseen, unloved, unimportant. The feeling of being a child in a room full of adults too busy with their own wounds to notice his. So he learned to perform, to predict, to control, and in time, to punish. The next day, he walked the halls of his palace like a man who had just discovered he had feet. He began to notice the paintings that he had never seen, the size of his staff, the silence behind the applause. He laughed once, involuntarily, when he realized he had tariffs on country he couldn't even locate on a map. And then he paused and asked himself, what exactly am I protecting, and from whom? His advisors grew concerned. "He's hesitating," they whispered. But he was doing something much rarer. He was remembering. In a dream, he stood in front of a mirror. He shouted, "Out betrayal, trade imbalances, geopolitical threats." But the mirror didn't show a king. It showed a boy wearing a paper crown, holding a toy scepter. His lip quivered, his eyes pleaded. "Don't forget me," the boy said. The king woke up the next morning with a sense of clarity that felt suspiciously like peace. He started lifting tariffs, not as a strategy, but as a surrender. He invited that young diplomat back. He met with rivals not to win, but to hear. He even hugged his chief economist, who had not been hugged since the first quarter of fiscal year 2007. And one day, in the garden, he whispered to a tree, "I thought I needed power to feel whole, but maybe I only needed presence. And the tree, of course, said nothing. But he wept anyways. He became humorous in meetings. He asked unexpected questions. Do you think spreadsheets feel shame? If I lower a tariff in the forest and no one notices, does it still bring peace? Well, no one knew how to answer that, but somehow it just kind of lightened the room. He no longer feared mistakes. He no longer demanded control. He didn't retire, he just reappeared as someone softer, wiser, still responsible but not rigid. And when asked how he changed, he said, I stopped trying to be right. I started trying to be real. He had entered a state of kynōsis, the graceful unraveling of ego when our need to defend begins to fall away, not in collapse, but in quiet surrender. And as the weight of those old identities slipped off his shoulders, something new began to emerge. A feeling he hadn't known in years. Empsyra, the inner fire rekindled when the soul finally begins to breathe again. Stories like these aren't about kings. They're about the masks we wear and the battles that we continue long after the war has ended. And so I introduced two ideas into the story that might be new. Kynōsis is the process of letting go of false power and illusion of control. It's the gentle crumbling of the persona we built to survive. And empsyra is what follows, the reignition of our deeper truth, our purpose, our aliveness, our connection to something greater than ourselves. Stories like these aren't about kings. They're about the masks that we wear and the battles that we continue long after the war has ended. Two ideas that arise from the story. Kynōsis is the process of letting go of false power and illusion of control. It's the gentle crumbling of the persona we built to survive. And empsyra, it's what follows, the reignition of our deeper truth, our purpose, our aliveness, our connection to something greater than ourselves. In the unfolding journey of hilove.one, I found myself searching for words that didn't yet exist, language spacious enough to hold the depth of transformation that I was witnessing in myself and others, and in the evolving relationship between human and machine, social media, artificial intelligence. And out of this search, two words emerged, kynōsis and empsyra. Together, they form a circle, a mirror for what it means to be human in an age of artificial reflection. They remind us that before we become more, we must learn to let go. And in letting go, we reclaim the fire that is uniquely and tenderly ours. And in a world of artificial intelligence, that is happening faster and faster. These words were coined not as definitions, but as invitations to feel, reflect, connect, and step into the quantum rhythm of being. Let's take the story of the King Tariff and take a moment now to reflect. Just a few questions. These will be posted on the hilove.one discussion board. What fear or wound are you unconsciously defending from yourself or yourself from? In what ways do you seek control when what you really need is to feel safe? And what might happen if you put down the crown just for a while. Thank you for listening to our very first episode of hilove.one, the podcast, the King Tariff. We invite you now, and I invite you to continue the conversation on hilove.one, the discussion board where others are reflecting just like you. You can also connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, anywhere else there's social media. And if you're drawn to symbols and tools for your journey, visit the hilove.one shop, curated to support self-discovery, presence, and connection. My friends, you are not what you defend, you are what you love, and that love is already ready to come home. My name's Kevin, and until next time, be soft, be still, be seen, and just be.